So why talk about abortion? Well, abortion is America's most frequently performed surgery on women. 4 out of every 10 pregnancies ends in abortion. Approximately 920, it varies year to year, but this was in 2014, just a little under 1 million abortions. That happened to be down 12% from 1.06 million in 2011, and actually some years before that it had reached a peak of 1.6 million surgical abortions, and then at other years 1.4, etc. Now, surgical abortion is a very important term because there are also chemical abortions, but we're just talking about surgical abortions. Globally, 25% of pregnancies ended in abortion between 2010 and 2014. The reason that these are slightly dated figures is it takes several years before they get the current, up to the current year. 2,904 surgical abortions occurring every day in America totals more than all lives lost in the destruction of the World Trade Center. That's obviously a very significant number. So if abortion does not kill children, then the pro-life position is a serious threat to women's rights and personal liberty, and that's how it's viewed by people of the pro-choice persuasion. We'll talk about the meaning of those terms, especially pro-choice. There's a lot of pro-lifers who say we shouldn't use the term pro-choice. We should call it what it is, which is pro-abortion or anti-life. It's probably one of those issues, from my point of view, where if you're going to engage people in dialogue, which I think we want to do, you normally take whatever name they call themselves. So just like we don't, in the old days when I'd be introduced to speak somewhere, I was usually introduced as the anti-abortion speaker. Well, I much preferred pro-life because that's what I call myself. Likewise, we could say pro-abortion, but the person themselves wants to be called pro-choice. So I think we should call them pro-choice, but then challenge what does that actually mean? And we'll get to that, because it's so it's been around so long now that people say pro-choice without even thinking, what does that mean? Well, you're pro-choice about any number of things and pro-life about any number of things. Aren't we talking about abortion? You know what I mean? So how can pro-choice just be the descriptive term for abortion rights? So it's also, if abortion doesn't kill children, then it's responsible for imposing false guilt on women who've had abortions or have encouraged them, and maybe you helped your friend get an abortion, and why would you heap guilt on me when that's just what friends do? But if abortion does kill children, on the other hand, the pro-choice stance is responsible for 58 million innocent people dying since Roe v. Wade, January 22nd, 1973, and is largely to blame for the guilt feelings, depression, and even suicidal tendencies of many women deceived that abortion is in their best interest. So the stakes are high. I mean, the stakes on the abortion issue are extremely high, and they get higher every year, and they get higher for every person, because every person knows more people then who have had abortions. They don't always know that those people have had abortions, but they know more people by definition who've had abortions. And if you have a good friend who's had an abortion, your daughter had an abortion, you drove your daughter to the abortion clinic as a father or a mother, your roommate had an abortion, your good friend got a girl pregnant and paid for her abortion, you are the chairman of the deacon board and your daughter got an abortion. And how do you now feel about the pastor preaching against abortion and complicity in abortion? And it's just so widespread. I got a text this morning from a girl who, and I'll say her name, Diane, because she's publicly told her story, and I've had her permission to talk about her in a few of my books. But Diane came to live with us when she was 18 years old. She was pregnant. She had had an abortion before she came to stay with us. She'd been kicked out of her own home, unbelieving home. She'd lived with a guy, a migrant worker. She'd gotten pregnant again. And we helped to place her child that she had while she lived with us into a Christian home for adoption. And a marvelous thing happened. Let's see, what would have been 3 years ago now. We were there with her and the adoptive parents at her reunion with the child that she had, that was just a couple of months, born just a couple of months after our second daughter, Angela, who's now 36, so I guess he would have been 33 years old when he was reunited with his birth mom. And I had met with his adoptive parents all those years earlier. They had come over to our house and met with them and talked about Diane and her reasons for placing the child and, you know, all of that. And it was one of the most beautiful and stirring and heart-moving things that we've ever experienced. And certainly it's just life-changing for them. They've become close. Diane's children born after she got married meet their brother, you know, and there's a reunion, and it's very powerful. Now, does it always turn out in these marvelous types of reunions? Of course not. But sometimes it does. But one thing's for sure, the person who was placed for adoption, even if they have feelings and unresolved feelings about any parent that gave them up for adoption, they're virtually universally grateful that they were not killed, but instead were placed into what has usually been a loving home. One thing is certain: if abortion really does kill children, silence and inaction aren't an option, or shouldn't be.